One of the biggest questions I get when people talk to me is, Phil, what's next? What's next? So today I want to talk about it, but from a little different perspective. The thing I want to focus this episode on is stop defending what was and start thinking about what's next. Hi, I'm Phil Cook, and I want to talk about what's next, but not in the terms you normally think of. Too often we spend our time defending what was. We exert an enormous effort to defend the status quo, the way things are. And I want to talk a little bit about positioning yourself so that you could understand and deal with what's coming up, because that's what's really important in your life. Hi, I'm Phil Cook, and thanks for tuning into this podcast. We're on YouTube, we're on iTunes. Love for you to subscribe and stay up to date with what we're talking about. So these issues are coming into your mailbox and you're getting notified about them, because these are so very important. If you're a communications professional, if you're a creative professional, if you're a leader of creative people, or just a leader who wants to be more creative, I would encourage you to subscribe and listen to some of these issues, because I think they're so important. In fact, I'm so passionate about it. That's why I created my Unique Planner. If you don't have it yet, I'd encourage you to get your hands on it. Unique, the ultimate planner for creative professionals. I talk in one of the episodes about it at detail. I'd encourage you to go check that out, because I tried them all. I'm an early adopter from a digital perspective. I've got to-do apps. I got an envelope or a folder full of them on my computer. But I realize that sometimes we need to stop and focus on what's really important in our lives and what we need to accomplish. And that's when I switched to print. But I could never find a print planner that really had what I needed, minimal stuff to help guide me through my day, to really keep the priorities out there, and yet unleash me to let my creativity really flow. And so we created one, and it's this Unique Planner. And I'd encourage you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore can order it for you, and uniquecreativeplanner.com. Go check it out, and you'll find more information in our notes section. So let's talk about positioning yourself for what next. It's interesting that a few years ago, the Salvation Army, which my wife Kathleen is on their national board, we're huge supporters of the Salvation Army. We really believe in the work they're doing. It's so interesting that here's an organization that began on a street corner in London, and today is now the largest social service agency in the entire world. And they're doing remarkable work. And it's just interesting that a few years ago, we went to do the media at their 150th anniversary celebration at the incredible O2 Arena in London. And Kathleen and I were there working with the media team, helping cover that event, helping support that event. And I hosted a film festival of films that various members of the Salvation Army had made from all over the world. And we had a really terrific time. And one of the times, it was funny. The O2 Arena is a gigantic arena. Remember, it was built for the Olympics. And around the perimeter, they had different vendors and different museum exhibits about the history and the impact and the story of the Salvation Army. And one day I had a break, and I decided to take a walk. So I was walking around the perimeter, and I stopped at their store. They had a giant Salvation Army store there with resources and books and music and musical instruments. They had a giant section of musical instruments here at the store. And as you can imagine, it was the Salvation Army, so they were mostly brass instruments. There were trombones, there were trumpets, cornets, tubas, brass band kind of stuff. And I sat there thinking, this is in my own little arrogant way, I sat there thinking, whatever happened to the electric guitars? I mean, how much has music changed in the last 150 years? There's no keyboards, there's no amps, there's no electric guitars, there's no drum sets. Come on, guys, get with it. Get with the world. And I thought, tomorrow when they do their parade throughout downtown London, it's going to be kind of an embarrassment, because it's the old brass band thing that's been going on for 150 years. Well, to my shock, I have to say, to my total surprise and shock, it shows you what an idiot I can be. The next day, when they rolled out and did that parade through downtown London, people stood 10 people deep just to get a glimpse of that incredible brass band. I mean, for miles and miles and miles, there were hundreds of thousands of people turned out throughout London to see the Salvation Army's brass band and the parade that accompanied it, going throughout entire downtown London. It was just an amazing spectacle. It reminded me of the power of tradition. It was a great wake-up call to me about the power of tradition. And just last week, as I produced this podcast, I just got back night before last from a week in London during the armistice. They were having the celebration of the ending of World War I. It was the armistice week there. And again, once again, I was reminded about how important tradition can be in our lives. Kathleen and I went to a concert. The London Symphony did a really amazing string concert in St. James, Piccadilly. In the Piccadilly section, it was a great old church built in the 1600s in the heart of London. And it was just an incredible time of remembrance about the devastation of World War I. And just, it really flooded me with the idea that tradition matters. Tradition is important. But here's the caveat. Here's the irony. The problem is so many of us mistake tradition. Instead of it being a reminder, we think of it as a destination. We get stuck in tradition. We don't change our thinking. We don't change our style. Now, here's the deal. If you're a Christian like me, you understand that the Bible teaches that God never changes. God's word never changes, but everything else does. Everything else does. People change, trends change, styles change, equipment changes. Think of how the digital world has transformed our culture. And if we don't speak the language of that change, we will be incredibly ineffective at reaching the next generation, at reaching the current generation, or reaching anybody when it comes to it. So I want to talk a little bit about change because I think it's so important. Remember, Jesus completely threw a wrench in the way the religious leaders thought in his day. They were so stuck. They were like in marble. They were so stuck in the way they did things that Jesus challenged them. He provoked them in amazingly new directions. In fact, even when they would ask him questions, his answers were completely unexpected. Completely unexpected. I mean, they just didn't do things that way. Sadly, I find that we work with a lot of churches today, a lot of ministries, a lot of nonprofit organizations, even a few companies that still are stuck in the we don't do things that way kind of thinking. So I want to talk a little bit about change because I wrote a book called Jolt a number of years ago. And Jolt was really about how to position your life for the amazing amount of change that's happening out there. And one of the things I put in the book, I did a study of heart surgery, open heart patients. There you go. People that have had open heart surgery. My father was one. And I discovered that the vast majority of open heart surgery patients go back to their old lifestyle within about 2 years, sometimes less, which means the threat of death doesn't even make some people change. I think you probably work with people that really struggle with change, that just like the way it's always been done. Kevin Kelly, my friend Kevin Kelly, who co-founded Wired Magazine, said something really interesting. He said that today the average phone app, updates about every 30 days, which means every 30 days we have to relearn how to use it. It's got new features. It's got new interface. It's all new. And so really our lives today are about constant change. Every 30 days, we've got to learn things new. We're all newbies in the digital world. So here's some things I want you to know. If you're struggling with your team, if you're struggling with people around you who don't get change, who are they're not getting your ideas, they're not getting the importance of why, I want to tell you why people don't change. I want to give you 4 key reasons why people don't change, because if you can tap into those reasons and understand them, it will really help you bring your team to the next level, get them to understand what in the world you're talking about. Okay, you with me? Number 1, key reasons people resist and fight change. Number 1, self-interest. They feel like change is an unfair imposition on their territory. No matter what we do in organizations today, if you've got more than 2 or 3 people, walls and silos start to get built. People like their territory. People are control freaks. And so they start building their own silos, and they start thinking about their interest in this. What does it mean for me? You've heard the phrase, what's in it for me? Well, let me tell you, when it comes to change, it's the first question people ask. What's in it for me? Self-interest is huge. People will fight for their turf. They will fight for the turf, and they want to be able to exert control. I mean, people just like to control their territory. They may have a cubicle. Maybe all they have is their cubicle. By golly, they want to have control over that cubicle. So when you think about how much people like control, that's a key. That's a key. Self-interest is the biggest thing. So the question becomes, what is this change? How does it impact them personally? That's a big thing. Number 2. Most people resist change because of a misunderstanding or a lack of trust. Maybe you tried these changes before and they didn't work, or you went back, and so they don't trust you this time. A lot of organizations suffer from that. They see failures that the organization has been through over the years, and they think, well, you know what? They screwed that up, and they screwed that up, and this wasn't a positive thing. Why should I trust them now? That's an important thing. I read a study recently that said about 77% of emails are misunderstood. Think about that for a minute. The vast majority of emails are misunderstood. So if that's the case, if you send out your request or your change or your plans or your vision through email, guess what? The vast majority of people probably don't get it. It happens when you present, when you talk to a group of any kind. It's just incredibly, incredibly important. So think about the fact that people just misunderstand. So as a leader, you have to go out of your way to present the options, to help them understand the issues. You really, we have this thing called secret knowledge in the advertising industry. The idea is that just because I know something, I assume the people out there will know it too. And so when I write an advertising or marketing campaign, I don't think I need to explain these things to them, but I really do. Same is true with change initiatives. If you're trying to get change happening in an organization, you have to go out of your way. Assume nobody knows anything, and you have to explain it all. That's really very, very important. Third big reason people resist change is people just have different ways of assessing and evaluating things. Everybody has opinions, and not everybody sees the benefit as greater than the trouble it will take to make that benefit happen. Everybody has a different idea of whether this is worth it or not. And let me tell you, it's worth taking the time to understand that, because even geography has to do with this. For instance, as a CEO or as a team leader, as a creative director, whatever you are, you may not care where the coffee pot is located. But to a secretary or to someone nearby, that may be a big deal for them. You don't care where the workroom is or the break room or something else is located. But you know what? For certain people, that's a big deal. So you have to understand that everybody has their own way of assessing things. Everybody has a different list of priorities in your organization. I see it all the time, even in our company. Whether it's a producer, whether it's a communications director, whether it's a graphic designer, whoever they are, they have different priorities than I do. So I have to take that into consideration before I make a major change happen. So just remember, their priorities aren't your priorities. Number 4, people lack confidence in the decision-making process. That's a big, big reason people resist change. And that's really a statement about leadership. People have seen things go bad before, and they just lack confidence in the decision. Why are we doing this? That's a big question you get a lot when change initiatives get launched. Why are we doing this? So again, it's a matter of explanation. It's a matter of understanding. It's helping people get over those obstacles so they really understand why you need to make the change happen in the first place. The key to all this, and I think this is really important if you're trying to get change happening in your organization, is make sure people are aware and involved in the process. Don't spring something on them at the last minute. Don't shock them at the last minute. Don't think, they're going to love this. Don't just assume everybody's going to go crazy over your brilliant idea. You know what? Bring them along. Give them a sense of ownership. The earlier you make them part of the process, and the earlier they start submitting ideas and feeling some ownership in that change, the better they will be on board when the change actually happens. So get them involved early. That's incredibly, incredibly important. And so this episode was important because knowing why people resist change is half the battle toward getting them to change. Why they resist change is so important. And what I see are executives and leaders of all kinds beating their heads against the wall because they don't understand. And by the way, this is a big lesson in leading up. You may be a designer. You may be a writer, a communications person. You may be just a regular mid-level executive or person at your team. And very often you have to inspire your leaders with why they need to change. As a consultant, we see it all the time because we go into organizations and we have to get CEOs or pastors or leaders of all kinds on board with the change that we're suggesting. And I've had such resistance. I had one organization one time that they hated change so much, they had regular departmental meetings to figure out how to get rid of me. Even though the changes we were making got them more recognition, got them more equipment, more tools, got them the donor response had gone way up. Great things were happening, and yet they hated change so much. All they could do is meet together to figure out how to get rid of me. So understand that you may be leading up, and very often understanding why people resist change will help you understand why your supervisor, your boss, your CEO is fighting the change as well. So it's incredibly, incredibly important. And so the question we always need to ask ourselves is, what are we fighting in our own lives? What change are we fighting? How do we get stuck in ruts? Just because something worked in 1989 doesn't mean it's going to work today. Just because a marketing campaign, just because an email campaign, just because of a donor development campaign, just because it worked years ago doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work today. We have to always get ourselves in a position where we understand why change matters and be open to it. Be open to it. It's not just about us convincing other people. It's about us being open to the change as well. I think it's incredibly important because if you can answer the question in your own life about how you're fighting change and what you need to do to be more open to change, it'll have a huge impact on your ability to succeed in whatever area you've chosen. Remember, change is coming whether you like it or not. Change is coming whether you're ready for it or not. This is a world of rapid 24/7 change. We live, as you know, in the most distracted culture in the world. It's the fastest changing culture in the history of the world. And so the quicker you are to embrace change and the more you know about helping get your team and other people involved in your organization on board to helping change happen, the better position you'll be for your ideas to get noticed, for your ideas to get implemented, for your plans to actually be executed. And remember, the greatest plans in the world don't matter unless they're actually executed, unless they're put into place. So thanks for tuning in. Remember, we're on YouTube, we're on iTunes. Go write a review, talk about if you've enjoyed the podcast or you've enjoyed the YouTube channel, whatever you're watching or listening to, let us know. And please go in and comment about it. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget, I'm at philcooke.com, PhilCooke, writing about these kind of issues all the time. And I'd love to hear your comments and your ideas. So stay with us. We'll be continuing to talk about how to take your career to the next level, particularly when it comes to creativity, leadership, media, the kind of things that will help you get noticed, your ideas get out there and really make a difference in the world. Thanks a lot.